There are essentially four main resources in Dota. They are gold, experience, spells, and items. Two of these are resources that you fight for, and the other two are resources that you fight with. Bear with me if you don't know what I mean by resources yet. Let's look at the first two. If you didn't know already, gold and experience matters a lot in Dota. If two players are equal in skill, but one player has more items and levels, that player is probably going to win. Needless to say, better players are better at gaining those resources too. There isn't a single pro game where the casters don't bring up the gold and XP difference. In fact, almost the entire game of Dota is a battle for these resources. Look here. What do you do in a game of Dota? Well, you farm creeps, you kill heroes, you break buildings. All of these things gives you gold and experience. Then, when your team decides you have enough, then you try to end the game by breaking more buildings. That's Dota. So much like the real world, the more you have, the easier it is to get more. Imagine if you started the game with a Midas at 0 minutes. Unless you really suck, you're obviously going to farm faster than people who start without it. For items that increase your farming speed, the earlier you get them, the better they'll be. This is also true for experience. At level 1, Lina and Shadow Fiend obviously can't nuke down creep waves, but later on in the game, it becomes a breeze. Obviously, the faster you kill creeps, the faster you'll get golden XP. The earlier you get to that point, the better. So in the early game, obviously getting a golden XP advantage definitely matters a lot, but actually this is what dictates the entire pacing of the rest of the game. The winning team can usually force fights and take objectives quite easily. The bigger the advantage, the easier it is. Now on to how to use your golden experience. So if your skill build on Storm is Overload and Stats, and your item build is to buy 6 Tranquil Boots, you're probably not going to go very far. This is the balance in Dota. In some games, when you're behind, you can gain a big advantage if you use your gold better than the enemy. How you use your gold and which spells you choose to level up matters a lot. That alone can win or lose you games depending on how well you do. This is something that comes with practice. There are a lot of recommended skill and item builds, but you shouldn't be afraid to deviate if the situation demands. Moving on, I mentioned that the other two resources are your spells and your items. These resources should be treated differently because they are resources you have that come back to you over time after you use them. So let's say this is your team and that is their team. You have a team fight where every spell is used and some people die. Anyway, exactly a minute later, another 5v5 fight breaks out. But you have an Enigma on your team and he used Black Hole last fight. You won't have Black Hole if you fight right now. In other words, your team is down on resources. Because of this, your team should be avoiding this fight as much as possible, while the other team should be forcing this fight as much as possible. If the fight does start, the odds are stacked against your team. In other words, the outcome of the fight is likely to be dictated by resources. Next, so something very important in Dota is how easy it is to use your spells. It's pretty obvious that Viper ult is easier to hit than Pudge Hook, right? So if we compare Ogre Stun to Lina Stun, Ogre Stun obviously can't miss, but it can only hit one person. Lina Stun can possibly hit 5 people. It could also miss entirely. Spells in Dota are all balanced somewhere between the minimum and maximum strength of the spell, the cooldown, which hero the spell is on, synergy, how easy it is to use, as well as many other factors. Key point here is, fights in Dota are usually won by the team that gets the most value out of their spells and items. If you can maximize your value and minimize your opponent's value, that's how you win. An example of something you can do to maximize your value is to land AoE spells like Sand King and Enigma ult on multiple people. An example of something you can do to decrease your opponent's value is dodging spells with Blink or BKB. That's another way to win. The concept of resources is elsewhere as well. There are 3 lanes, the jungle, and an Ancients camp for each team. Every minute, new gold and XP spawn in the form of creeps. Essentially, if your team killed every creep in each of these locations, your team is farming the most gold they can. On the other hand, if your team doesn't kill those creeps, that is basically gold and XP lost forever. So if Team A farms the 3 lanes and Team B farms 3 lanes and the jungle, if the lanes are even, then Team B will have a massive advantage as the game goes on. This advantage gets bigger every minute, and if you throw in the idea of farming the enemy's jungle, then Team A just won't stand a chance. Okay, so let's do a recap. Number 1. Early golden experience matters a lot. The more you have, the easier it is to get more. This goes double for buying farming items like Quelling Blade, Battle Fury, Radiance, and Midas. Some heroes like Spectre actually farm very slowly if you don't get that boost. Number 2. Making good decisions with those resources can win you the game, and similarly, making bad decisions with those resources can lose you the game. Your spell and item builds are extremely important. Number 3. When using your spells and items, you need to maximize your value and minimize your enemy's value. And number 4. If you're farming more areas of the map than your opponent, you're set to win the game. Ideas like farming the enemy jungle and ancients can give you a huge advantage. Remember that Dota is really complicated. To make the most of these concepts takes a lot of time and practice. Key points to take away from this are that maybe your team shouldn't use every spell to kill one person, maybe you should try farm the enemy jungle, and maybe you should make the most out of every gold and XP you get. Good luck, and thanks for watching.